My name's Lawrence Bolter. I'm the current chair of NACE, and I'll be chairing this session of the Leaders Debate. Today we're looking at driving efficiency through technology, and this is quite an important area, I suspect, in that it pretty well touches every corner of public services, so there aren't many people who don't have to give it some thought at some point. And it's probably true that it's the pandemic over the last year or so has brought the use of technology into a much sharper focus. So we're probably in a different position to where we were when we entered into the crisis, as it were. And so it's probably a good time to catch our breaths and take a stock check of where we are. And our panel today will help us with that and help us identify some of the issues that we all now face. We have with us today Caroline Andrews from Vision. We have Simon Pearson from the Energy and Systems Catapult, and we have Councillor Drew Mellor, who's the leader of Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole Council. In a minute, I'll ask the panel if that's okay to tell you to tell us a bit about yourselves and just how you think how you fit into this area. But I just want to remind the audience that if you do have any questions, then please use the chat and we'll try and find time to fit those in during the session. So I'd like to say good morning to the panel. And if I can start with sorry, I've got the change in my list here. We can start with you, Simon, and just give us a few words of how you fit in and the work that you do, please.
Certainly, yeah. Thanks, Lawrence. So I'm head of digital and data at the Energy Systems Catapult, which is one of 10 catapults looking at different areas. So we're focused specifically on energy systems, and our role as a catapult is all around stimulating and supporting innovation to help move the energy sector towards achieving its net zero goals by 2050. And within that context, my role specifically is looking at how we can use digital technologies, digital systems, and more importantly, or as importantly, the data that goes with that to actually enable that transition, because without that, we won't be able to do it. So we work with government, industry, academia to help drive those strategies forward.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Good morning, Caroline. Would you like to tell us a bit about yourself and how you fit into this, please?
Yeah, no problem at all. My name's Caroline Andrews. I work for a company called Vision, which is part of the Exponential E Group. I've been working with public sector for the last 20 or so years, fundamentally looking at software and services to support digital transformation. And then also I have been a town councillor for 3 years, and I'm a trustee of an almshouse charity. So look at things from the other side of the fence as well. So yeah, we've been focused on very much IT and network services and just looking at ways to help public sector bodies do more with less, which has been the ongoing theme, I think, for the last 10 or 15 years.
Right, thank you. You've been busy over the last year, I expect. Then.
Absolutely.
And Drew, would you like to tell us a bit about how you've been dealing with this?
Yeah, absolutely. Morning, everybody, and great to meet you. So my name's Drew Mellor. I'm the leader of Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole Council. That's actually a brand new council. We're 2 years old. So effectively, we've come to this through a local government reorganisation journey, and that's led us into having quite a significant transformation project, effectively, and which I actually, as a leader, I take the portfolio holder responsibility for transformation, and it's tying that into our ambition to be, as a new council, bringing 3 more legacy councils together to come out of this journey as a digital exemplar for local authorities. We think there's a real opportunity in that, and we're hopefully proving some of it as well. So, and my personal background is in private equity, so I have a little bit of experience of putting organisations together and trying to sort of drive not just efficiencies but better outcomes and services through that strength of coming together.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to stick with you, Drew, if that's okay, with our first question. It sort of fits in quite nicely. I mean, the big question is, where do you start? Where do bodies start to map out their options for efficiency and where they're going to be, what their ambitions are, perhaps even identify what the risks are. I don't understand that probably the kind of things that have been going through your mind recently.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think the key for us, and this is quite an interesting sort of take on this in the environment where budgets have been challenged. But how can we really genuinely look at this as about investment and efficiency, not just cuts? Effectively, through local authorities, we've been looking at how to cut things for years, and now we're saying, well, the project we're going through, by putting 3 organisations together, where can we materially invest? That actually then that also provides that efficiency. So it's an opportunity for us to look at how we can work materially differently, and that's fundamental. It's bluntly easier for us to start that journey because there's a necessity breeds invention thing. We're bringing 3 councils together, so we have the opportunity to look at it on that base. But we're our transformation project that we're doing is where I mean investment is we believe we're investing £40 million over the next 4 years, but that should, by the end of the project, be delivering a £45 million a year recurring saving through, being that digital exemplar council. So absolute clarity in terms of what the vision is. We are moving towards being a digital council, and we believe we can do better services from that. And then, it's effectively, we're not going to do that by cuts. We're going to do that by investment, which will ultimately drive efficiencies. Okay. So we won't particularly talk for too long because I believe we've probably got a number of questions to get through. But as a starter, that's how we've sort of started on our journey.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. And I think, Simon, you've got very much a top-down view on this as well, haven't you, as far as where we actually start?
Yeah, I mean, we've got a slightly narrower focus perhaps than Drew in terms of that. So given our focus on the energy system and low carbon, so we work a lot with local authorities in their drive to achieve their low carbon targets. So we look at local area energy planning. How do they balance the needs for housing growth together with where there are network constraints for the energy provision? How do they manage things like, I don't know, the installation of solar farms and some of the new technologies and self-sufficiency kind of stuff. So it's really all around those areas where we know that local area or local authorities need help and support, and we support them with that planning aspiration, basically, to come up with those most efficient plans to balance all of those complex factors.
Okay, brilliant. And I think if we go, would I be right in saying, Caroline, that when you're mapping out, you're sort of further into the nuts and bolts of this, aren't you?
Absolutely. I mean, I think from our perspective, it's very much about understanding what the outputs are. What does the public sector body want to actually achieve, and what are they looking for? Because efficiency can be obtained by marginal gains, and it's not just, it's thinking big, but sometimes starting small. So sometimes some of the digitization and the optimization, whether it's a single application or whether it's a whole infrastructure, even down to a small network change or tweak or provision, can actually make the efficiencies. And I think, a lot of digital transformation depends on the maturity of the organization as well. So sometimes there is circumstances where you can have an organization that has a huge aspiration, whether it's to move into AI or something like that. But as an organization, they aren't mature enough to really leverage the gains that can be given by that. So I think it's really key to kind of balance that movement and make sure that it's right for the organization at the time.
It's okay if I stick with you for the next question as well? So it leads on quite nicely. What do you think that looks like? How would you tell that those efficiencies are in place or have been capitalised on or taken advantage of? What would it look like if you were going in to see going to have a look at someone?
Is that for me? Sorry. Sorry. It's basically looking at whether it's a cost efficiency saving, whether it's a people challenge. Sometimes we've worked with organisations that are looking to make efficiencies in facilities, and you can look at that and actually adjust what you implement to make sure that they, whether it's the shutting down or the movement of a data centre, maybe it's sometimes kind of with a cloud first initiative, an organisation, and we've had one recently where they did a big cloud drive, but actually they're now moving backwards and moving particular applications back onto a traditional on-premise data center model and saving £300,000 a year in the process, just by have taken that big step and realised that the efficiencies aren't necessarily what they'd expected, and are now evolving and from an agile way, moving backwards and actually going, no, this wasn't right. Let's take a step back. Let's move that application back onto a more traditional model. And it really is sort of an evolution, really. And it's certainly not a one size fits all at all.
Do you see much of that? I mean, there's a brave step, like going backwards after assuming that the going cloud based was going to be. And are people coming to that kind of conclusion on occasion?
Absolutely. I mean, I think especially in the last few years, rather than there be a big movement towards cloud first, it's very much a hybrid approach now that people are looking at. It isn't a one size fits all, and it's looking at what you have, optimizing what you have and saying, right, this is fit for purpose. This is perfect, to go into AWS, Azure, whichever public cloud platform, UK cloud. And then sometimes moving back and going, you know what, for this, I'd rather use Crown Hosting. It's a very cost-effective data center environment, and we, as Vizion and as Exponentially, we support those organisations and make sure what we go for is right for them.
Oh, brilliant! Oh, thank you. Drew, how do you know when your job's done? What does it look like?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as a politician, there's an obvious answer to that, isn't there? But I think that's an important factor, isn't it? It's about understanding the customer, the resident, really, and technology enables us to do that as well. So, for instance, there are important pieces of work around resident surveys to understand how well you're actually delivering something. But by using technology, we can actually be much more proactive in working with our knowing our customer effectively. So really good CRM systems. We're effectively moving into a space where we're trying to give you a live example. If somebody's bins have been missed a couple of times, what's that telling us about how well their circumstances might be changing? Should we then proactively approach them? And that can lead on to a lot of sort of strengths-based approaches in assistive technology, where we can hopefully improve the quality of people's lives, and that drives efficiency as well, because if we can look after people and provide for people in the spaces they're happier with, it's ultimately more cost effective as well. So there's a lot of it, but another driver is it falls back down to the medium-term financial plan. At the moment we're seeing the whole sector is seeing mass growth in terms of adult social care pressures and other things like that. So if we just carry on doing the same approach to fixing that or servicing that problem, we're going to get the same result. So what we're trying to do is look at it differently. How can we intervene? How can we provide a better service whilst it's more efficient as well?
So you think within, obviously the planning is important, but you think there's a need to be reactive as well, monitoring and opportunistic.
Yeah, absolutely. Know the people you're dealing with, and when people are dealing with you, then they should only need to be telling you their details once and their story once, effectively, and how that can work across departments. So it's a massive opportunity, to lead in that effectively, and both in terms of council services, our place, and ultimately, how interactive are other partners as well.
Yes, brilliant. Thank you. Thank you. And Simon, you've got to get a different perspective. I guess the planning element, you support with planning, and you must be looking for metrics to be able to know that your planning is effective.
So I guess similar to the point Caroline made, that when we develop these plans, it's all about understanding what's relevant for that particular area, that community, because what you might need in one area could be quite different to another. It could be around energy efficiency, it could be around growth for new housing, it could be a whole range of things. So if we understand what those objectives are and outcomes they're looking for, then we can help build plans and models around that. And the proof of the pudding in terms of whether we've achieved that or whether the plans have achieved that is measuring it afterwards. So I don't know, an example might be the challenge of where do you put EV charges, public EV charges? Because the best place to put them from a networking point of view is where you've got the most capacity of electricity. That may or may not be the best place to put them for the traffic flows and the way that the community need it. So, you know, we will set targets for that, and then we can measure that, and then you can very quickly understand whether they're in the right place or not, and adapt that plan as you go through. So if we're able to measure the success factors, I guess, against those plans and adapt in a fairly agile way thereafter.
I get the feeling from all three answers that a degree of agility is really quite important. That you can't assume that the outcomes are going to be as you expect them to be. There are some other factors. Okay, brilliant. That's really helpful. I mean, the next question really is about how we focusing into where the key areas are. Perhaps the areas with the most gains or ones that are critical and enablers for other efficiencies. Caroline, do you have any thoughts on that?
I think it is. I think different organisations have different needs and different challenges. And I work for a technology company. It's not technology for technology's sake. Sometimes I think it comes back to that outcomes again. What are you looking to achieve? Because sometimes going down a particular digitization route or a particular solution doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to achieve what you want. So it's being very, very clear and almost working backwards. And as I went at my point earlier, marginal gains is key, because if there are some cost challenges, sometimes actually just changing providers of certain services or moving in different directions in terms of, especially with the pandemic, remote working and other bits and pieces, all that can drive efficiencies. But it's as long as you know what you want the outcome to be, it's much easier to find the solution.
Yes, yeah. Keep an eye on the goal. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Drew, are there any areas then that you consider to be more of a focus than others, or more critical than others?
It's just really, following on from Caroline's point, really, is around that flexibility. I think one of the, if we look at some of the technological projects that haven't worked in the last, 20 years, there's often an overly specific requirement from councils which take really long to procure and implement. And by the time we've got through that process, we're actually talking about the wrong solution. It's not the same solution. So Caroline's absolutely right when she's talking about maintaining that flexibility. What as an example of what we're trying to do, how we're trying to evolve in it. So we've just appointed our strategic implementation partner, which is a mixture of KPMG and Agilysys. And how we're contractually working with them is in type work packages, effectively. So our contract allows us to work with them in work package chunks, to design, develop, and implement solutions and change quicker. Sorry, wrong time to keep my phone on. To quicker. So it's about how we can actually work with our technology partners, our strategic implementation partners, to be more adaptive effectively. So, one of the big things we're trying to do at the start of that journey is work on what are the, and it's an obvious thing, but what are the quick wins? Because you need to build confidence. You need to build confidence internally with the officer base, and you need to build confidence with residents that this is a journey that they can see some benefit from. Yeah. So get some quick wins, be confident about doing it, but make sure you're working with partners who you can be nimble and adaptive with.
Brilliant. Thank you. Simon, and where do you actively have a priority when you're supporting in the planning? Do you have prioritised fields or areas?
Well, I guess we do, but I mean, if I step out the local area planning piece, at a more general level, the energy provision is changing in a style, a way, a rate, and a pace that simply has never happened before. None of the previous changes in the world of energy are close to this transition, and it's happening at a pace faster than ever. So that, in terms of key areas for us, it's simple things like, given all of that change, given the distribution, the reliance on wind and solar, all of the things that you can predict, but they are intermittent by their nature. How do you keep all of that? How do you plan that and forecast that so that you've got the right amount of energy at the right time in the right place? And that's both long-term planning, where do you build the next solar farm or offshore wind farms, right down to sub-second planning, because the network is very dynamic. So, you know, and it covers all of that. So yeah, the things that are critical for us is how do you balance all of that from individual homes all the way up to the entire system, so that when you come home and press the switch, your lights come on. And that sounds like a glib statement, but that's a non-trivial thing as we're going forwards. Yes, it's changing faster than than you would imagine in many ways.
Yes, yeah. Imagine, you have to be pretty reactive over other things and open to change if it's needed. We've talked a bit about cloud first, and obviously there's been quite a lot of drive to make use of the cloud. What are the challenges there, do you think? Can I come to you, Drew, with that one?
Yeah, absolutely. So effectively, we, and again, come back to the fact that we're setting up an organisation from 3 distinct, legacy systems, effectively. So it's making some of those decisions about how we choose that infrastructure, around us. So we're at least in a fortunate point of needing to change, needing to move towards something. I won't respond for the more technologically advanced members of the panel, but then it's also things, it's like, data, privacy, accessibility, etc. How well these systems can stand up and robustly. So we've been trying to work through all of those challenges. But now is the time to do it. And there's been a huge amount of learning, hasn't there, in terms of how these technologies have advanced and effectively, we can move forward with some real confidence. And often in local government, we haven't moved forward as quickly as some of our sort of more contemporary colleagues. Yeah. So there's learning there immediately. We can, we're not first adopters, so we can go into that space with some confidence.
Yes. Okay. Brilliant. And Caroline, you've talked about people stepping back from sharing from the cloud. Where do you think sharing's worked the best? Where using cloud services?
I think it down to, obviously, the major thing is the connectivity. A lot of and it's been said many times before, accessing anything from a cloud perspective is only as good as your network. It's only as good as the speed and the connectivity at which you can obtain the data in that particular environment. Where you have critical systems, critical storage, that's where you have to define whether the cloud is the right solution for that particular element or not. And the way things are these days, a lot of the cloud vendors and stuff, it is very much a pick and choose. And it goes back to that agility. You can go around and you can change things, you can move things around, you can move things off a platform and back onto a platform, you can turn things off so it's not running 24/7, 365 when you don't need it to. But I think, the security and certainly the pandemic has brought this to the forefront. We as Exponentially Envision launched SD Home last year because it was all about trying to support remote workers and making sure that organisations had the ability to make sure that their workers were secure in terms of their activities that they were performing in a home environment rather than an office environment. And that's been a really strong driver. It's just maintaining a slightly different security footprint for public sector bodies as we move into a slightly different way of working.
Right, brilliant, thank you. And Simon, where did you factor in sharing into your advice as well?
Yeah, I mean, 2 things really. I agree with Caroline's point. The comms element is core. From our point of view, there is no right solution, whether it's cloud-based or on-premise or hybrid. The answer is it's the right solution for a particular need, and that's how it should be considered. You're always going to have people who are fixated on one or the other, and that's fair enough. But it's a case of picking the right solution. So we've been focusing more on some of the other barriers that stop people sharing it. So in the world of energy, it's a heavy regulated industry with discrete roles for parts of the supply chain, which to a large extent has mean they haven't shared data in the past. And that was okay when it was somebody generated it, somebody transmitted it, somebody distributed it, and somebody else used it. Unfortunately, that world is long gone now. And so now it's all jumbled up. So it's actually breaking down some of the non-technical barriers for sharing the data to allow people to do that, and also do it safely. And the cyber thing and data privacy, data protection, consent management for consumers, which is becoming a complete nightmare for people to understand who they've given their data to. All of that is coming much more strongly.
So there's some cultural elements in there as well, procedure. Right, we're reaching the end of this, and thank you much. I'm going to come to our last question, May, and it's going to be a quick one round the table. But we've all lived the COVID experience over the last year. What would you say, and in one or two words, what would you say the gains have been? That has, or if there have been any? There's been a lot of talk about capitalising the gains of COVID. Where do you think those gains might have been? Simon, thoughts on that?
Yeah, really quickly, I think it demonstrates the need to be agile because we've seen more changes in the last 12 months because of COVID in terms of people's work patterns and behaviours than we were planning in the next 5 years.
So agility. Caroline, any describing words you think that summarise your experience?
What organisations wasn't possible actually was, and there's been achievements as a result of that.
Right, brilliant, thank you. And any
following for both, what we can do at pace, what we can achieve effectively.